Welcome.
Hey, Reverend
All right,
We're
Allison.
so glad
back
y'all
again.
joined us tonight. My name's Allison Lanza. I'm one of the pastors at Ridglea Christian Church, and this is a part of our Facebook Live series on what it looks like to be faithful people in the world today. Our world right now that is so in uproar, that we're seeing things we've never seen before with pandemic and with the movements for anti-racism that are speaking out louder and clearer than before. And what does it look like for us as Christians to live faithfully today? So each week we have been interviewing different amazing faithful people in our community, pastors and nonprofit leaders and people who can be our guides to help guide us through this. So tonight we are thrilled to get to interview Willie Rankin, who you will get to hear more in a minute. We're also thrilled tonight to welcome our partner church, Community Christian Church, here with us tonight. And so Pastor Anthony Chatman will be interviewing Willie along with me, and I am so excited. Well, welcome everybody.
Hey.
Hi. I'll start. I introduced myself a little bit. Pastor Tony, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, my name is Pastor Anthony Chatman. I'm at Community Christian Church on the south side of Fort Worth. We've been replanting to the great town of Fort Worth for about 4 years now. Excited to be here and learn about Fort Worth and thrilled about our new partnership with Ridglea Christian Church. Amen.
We are so excited. And Willie, you're our honored guest tonight. Will you tell us a little bit more about you, about who you are, what you do?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Allison, for having me on. I appreciate anytime I get to spend with people from the community just to talk a little bit about living in Fort Worth and the work that I do. I would describe myself, if you were to ask me, I don't really like using job titles or anything. I always tell people I'm a community servant. I spend most of my time trying to serve the community. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a Christ follower, but overall I'm a regular guy. I spent 8 years in the Marine Corps. I enjoy I enjoy exercising. I think that's the first thing people notice when they talk to me, because for some reason my little races that I do are behind me. I watch football, play Xbox, go to the shooting range from time to time, and really I like relaxing with my wife. I think our favorite thing is just to sit outside and chill.
Absolutely.
So from that aspect, I'm just a regular guy. I'm 33 in age, but the work that I do is right now is a nonprofit work. I serve as the executive director at LVTRise. LVT stands for Las Vegas Trail. Las Vegas Trail is the name of a street that's in West Fort Worth that became pretty notorious in Star Telegram for some of the violence and activity that's been going on in the neighborhood. LVTRise started as a research project in collaboration with United Way and Catholic Charities to kind of study what is going on in that neighborhood and what are some resources that need. And LVTRise became a nonprofit to address some of the needs that were identified in the community. And one of the biggest needs is that the community said they wanted a community center that would give them access to social services and after-school programming. So I run I'm leading the effort on building that community center in partnership with the city of Fort Worth and their neighborhood services program. So we are a private nonprofit that works with a lot of partners in order to make change in the community. And my current role is specifically working in West Fort Worth for the Las Vegas Trail community.
I think you're way more than a regular guy. You are making a world of difference already at only 33, and you're, as folks that originally folks know, you're Las Vegas Trail Rise. Las Vegas Trail is our neighborhood. It's where our church is. And so we are so grateful for your work with us and with our neighbors to help our community and our neighborhood to thrive. So we're so grateful for that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate all the work that y'all have done and all the outreach and support that we've got as we find out all the things we have in common on what we want for the neighborhood. I believe us working together is the best way to get it done, because it's going to take a village.
Absolutely. Pastor Tony, do you have our next question?
Yes, I do. And first, let me say, fellow Marine, that I like you already. So you cannot say anything else would deter me. You know, devil dog to life. So simple fire. want to say that. So with that, you know, being a devil dog, I know there have to be some things that you're really passionate about. That just get your gears running. That when something happens, you just got to move. So what's your passion in life? What gets you going?
I want to say my passion and my calling has been being an advocate for human dignity. This is something that I guess I picked up just from an early age. I'm from a multiracial family. I have a little sister that's disabled. My grandmother's Japanese. She immigrated to the United States. But growing up, I felt like I've always had a strong voice, and people always said I had a way to articulate things in a way for people to understand. And whenever I seen someone like my sister get mistreated, I remember one time her first day in high school, she said she went to high school every day, and instead of people asking her what's her name, they'll ask her what's wrong with her. And in an average, if you're just a normal person and someone comes up to you, is like, hey, what's wrong with you? That's not right. But people felt like it was appropriate to ask her that, since she physically, you can see some of the differences that she was born with. Her mind was just the same as everyone else's as a normal teenager, but her body didn't develop because of some of the bone marrow disease that she got at an early age. So being able to stick up for her, teaching her how to speak for herself and standing up for herself became an early passion of mine, of making sure that she got treated fairly. The way my grandmother was treated, because she didn't know English that well. English was her second language. She immigrated from Japan. And when my father was also in the military, he did 5 deployments, 13-month deployments. He spent 4 years in the Marines, and then he spent another 18 years in the Army. But every deployment, my grandmother came to live with us to help us out, because my mom raising a disabled child and a young boy by herself was difficult. So my grandmother always came to live with us for those 13 months. But going out in public to see how she struggled with English in some places that she went with, and I always was trying to there to help her. But the way people would treat her because she didn't speak English that well, really bothered me growing up. And I took that with me in the Marines. I deployed to Iraq in 2009, where I was meritoriously promoted for a combat meritorious promotion during my time in Iraq. And during that time, a lot of the leadership noticed that I was the lead by example type of Marine. If any of my Marines were being mistreated, if they were not getting the supplies they needed or the resources they needed, I would always advocate and I always speak up for people who couldn't speak for themselves. And naturally, I got promoted just from more of selection from my peers of saying that this is a guy that we want to follow, because he will always do what is right for everyone, and he'll get in the dirt with us in doing it. So I picked up my leadership style that kind of ironed out my style and my passion when I was in the Marine Corps. And then fast forward me into the nonprofit world. I run into a lot of people that remind me of my sister, my grandmother, my family. We didn't have a lot of money growing up ourselves. My father joined the military to kind of help us overcome a lot of the barriers. So whenever I'm working with clients that said, hey, I went to this landlord and they said they wouldn't help me because of X, Y, and Z. But when I go to talk to the landlord, they can see I'm very articulate. I say the same things that the person I'm representing is saying, but they treat me different just because how I'm able to approach the situation. I always thought that was unfair for a lot of our people who are trying to come up from poverty or overcome some of the barriers that they faced in their past. So passionate, I would say that's more of a passion of mine. And if you ever hear me speak or see what I do, you can tell that it's deep in my heart about how people are treated. And I think I will always have that in me and I won't be able to shake it.
Yeah. You know what? As you were saying that, I was thinking, the word tells us that we got to be able to hear the people cry, right? You find that in scripture, but even God heard the people in Israel, in Egypt. He heard their cry, right? And I think that's the key point. You hear the cry, and when you hear the cry, you move to action. So thank you for that passion.
Thank you.
You muted, Allison.
Can y'all hear me?
There you go.
There we go. I'm so grateful for your passions, and they made a world of difference around the world as you served in Iraq, and are making a world of difference in our city and our neighborhood today. the fact that Pastor Tony's exactly right, that you can hear those cries and stand up and speak out alongside people to make it so everyone can be heard. So thank you for that. Where are you going for inspiration, particularly these days in kind of our COVID-19 pandemic? Where are you going for inspiration? This could be scriptures that are really speaking to you right now, or podcasts or movies or shows or books. Where are you going to get filled up to be able to keep fueling your passion to make a difference for our neighbors?
Yeah, I'm going in different places where I get my fuel from. I will say that my church, I go to the Creek in North Fort Worth, and I have a small group, and I've participated in Bible studies with my small group, even though they're virtual small groups. And we recently just dove into Psalm 23 line by line, just going deep into the word. I've also studied with the men's group during COVID-19, because I think a lot of what we're going through, I had to lean harder on the word versus what I normally did myself, was go to the gym or hang out with my friends and going out, since all that isn't necessary. And for everything going on when it comes to racial equity and for COVID-19, I had to dig deeper into the word during this time. So that's been fulfilling for me, knowing that I could surround myself even virtually with other followers to kind of understand that we're all facing a lot of the similar problems. My small group in particular are all married couples with young children. So
oh wow.
one with a 4-year-old, and it's funny because my wife is pregnant, and 4 other members of our small group also became pregnant. So we're all going through this phase of life.
Oh wow.
So we got small children and a pregnant wife, and we're kind of like, I'm glad we have each other during this time.
Y'all need all the support you can get.
Yeah. I guess a audio book I've been digging through. It's not too Christian friendly, but it is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. It's a story of a Navy SEAL about mental toughness. And I think I can relate, as being a veteran, a lot to things that David Goggins has went through when it comes to being a Navy SEAL and some of the situations he went through, and teaching mental toughness to get through some of the hardest times in life. So that's been a pretty good audio book. He curses like a sailor, but a lot of the points he makes dive into a lot that I can relate to on how I got to the position I'm at today, based off of being able to prioritize things that will affect me and things that can affect me.
Absolutely. And those of you watching on Facebook Live, we'll put in the link the podcast you referenced if you want to check it out and work on your mental toughness as well, so you can be a part of that.
Be caution, that one's not too church friendly. Like I said, it's
you got your warning, crowd.
Well, that's a good segue when you say it's not too churchy, right? So my next question for you would be, as you was getting into your small groups, and I know it's been sustaining you and everything, and when we talk about COVID-19, when we talk about the protesting and the riots, and what's the church role? I mean, how you see, is it the same? What's the difference? Where you see the church role in all this?
No, I think with each thing's had a different type of response. I think for COVID-19, I believe the church role is to show that Christ exists even without a physical structure of the church. And that's where a lot of churches stepped up and pastors stepped up on. We can still be a group. We can still pray, even if it's virtually. And even more so with your family. You have a lot of time to share the gospel in your own household for those who have families. And I was able to exercise some of the things that I wish I did if I didn't work so much and volunteer so much. I serve on a lot of committees and a lot of different boards for nonprofits. So I feel like a lot of things I want to pour in my son, I just didn't have time to do. But during this time, you're throwing a tantrum. He's like, you know what? I can yell at you, or let's just sit down and talk about it. Like, can we pray about it? And I've done that a few times. I never really got to do that because my time was always so short. But now that I'm working from home a lot, I can sit down and say, you know what, Liam, I know you're frustrated. And I get frustrated too. I'm gonna try to teach you something that, my father didn't really have a lot of time to teach me, and that's let's sit down and pray. So
what a gift.
Yeah, so the role of the church during COVID-19, I think, was more of still showing the presence of Christ, and for Christians to show the presence inside their household, even though they can't physically go to church. That doesn't mean we stop going to church. But for the more of the racial equity with Black Lives Matter, I've always said the role of the church more than ever is to share the gospel and evangelize. And I believe on social media, you probably see me post something that if you've been evangelizing this long, that should have prepared you for this talk that you need to have with a lot of our neighbors who don't understand that racism exists. And the example I use is a lot of people don't believe Christ exists. They'll tell you that so many bad things happen in the world. They'll tell you that you can't physically see him, or you can't, or how do you know? And a lot of it has to do with perspective, and a lot of it has to do with stories from the Bible. And I told people, when it comes to racism, let your neighbors tell their stories, and let their stories be your Bible to show that it exists, that it happens, but also don't attack people. Teach the gospel. You don't yell at people or argue with people about the gospel. You evangelize. And
Amen.
so that's what I tell a lot of people at the church. Like, if you've been evangelizing people to your church, you can also show how Christ would approach Jews and Gentiles, is how I describe it in races.
Yeah.
Because it's same story, just a different time period. It's nothing different about how you treat people. I don't think we should get too caught up in the worldly political sides that you want to get on today's generation. It all falls back into the word. This isn't anything new to the Bible. We've faced this before, and I think Christians need to understand that. I think the church needs to understand that, where their role is, that human rights, human justice, and knowing that people were created in the image of God is the message that needs to be said right now. And you can't be quiet during this time. You have to remind people of that. And so that's at least my personal belief on where the church should stand, just as a regular guy who
I love that connection between talking about evangelizing. That's something we know how to do as church. Evangelizing is tell the good news. We know how to tell the good news of God, and the good news of God right now in this time is that Black lives matter, that all lives are created in God's image. And what do we do to stand up for human justice for particularly Black lives right now that are being oppressed? And that's what God taught us to do, right? So Jesus showed us is freedom for those who are oppressed, good news to the poor. That's what we're good at talking about at church, and we're good at living. And so I love that connection. I hadn't thought about that. What word of challenge do you have for those listening right now on Zoom and Facebook Live? What word of challenge do you have for faithful people today? What's your challenge for us of where we're being called?
I mean, the Spirit will always put in your heart what needs to be said, or will reveal what any ignorance or bias that you might have. I think right now, my call that is to talk about what you may not understand, and have an open heart when it comes to seeking understanding, and be okay with speaking with people who are different with you. I know going to Iraq and having a few friends, I ran into a lot of people over my lifetime who are of the Muslim faith, and my biggest thing when interacting with them is just, I need to understand why you do certain things and what are certain things for, because in my ignorance, I never grew up in an environment that they did the things you did. I know one time I was working with a guy who wanted to be a mechanic, but he prayed 5 times a day. And I noticed a couple other people were always complaining. It's like, oh, he's lazy. He's stopping to work to go do that. And I was like, Christians would be a lot better if they prayed 5 times a day too.
Amen.
And it was just me seeking understanding on why you did that, and why I also helped protect him while he worshiped in that way. And that was just my personal say. It's like, you are different than me, and you believe different things. How do I make the space available for you to be different? Because in America, I do believe that our diversity is our strength. And by having people with different perspectives and from different backgrounds brings value to the overall American thread that we have. So this involves every walks of life. If you are from a rich family, poor family, whatever political lines you have, you need to reach out to the people you don't understand and seek understanding. You don't have to agree, but seek clarity on their perspective. And that is the hardest thing you can do right now, especially if you're coming it from a source of anger. But I'll say if you are following your spirit of what the Spirit puts in you, then you can understand that you're coming from the heart and you're coming from a place of love, of understanding. But you have to get yourself to that position where you're willing to speak your truth and hear others' perspective without giving hate. And if someone is showing hate towards you and your belief, then I believe in 2 Corinthians it says, that you have to have in your heart the letter of recommendation written on your heart, so it's known by all that Christ exists to you. You don't need a letter of recommendation from Christ or from Paul or from anyone. You need to have it written in your heart on what you're there for, and that is to seek understanding, seek perspective, and share the gospel. And that's my challenge for faithful people today is I got to toughen up and just do it. Just have those hard conversations.
Absolutely.
Yeah, amen. You make a great point about our differences being our greatest strength, right? And I think that's so on point is that most of the time we want to see the common things and we can't embrace those things that makes us different because that's how God made us. And with that in mind, I don't believe we can go back to the way it used to be, right? And no matter how much somebody want to say, I want to get back to normal, I think God is calling something different. And so my question would be like, what's your hope for the world? That one thing, that sweet spot that you have, if the world can look like something, what's that hope that the world might come out of this with?
Yeah, my hope is that we stop separating ourselves in this nation. I think we like dehumanizing each other based off of political parties or race or professions. And it is really dehumanizing to me when you identify people by something other than their name and by something other than what God has called them to be. So my hope in a sweet society is that this person is different and I have to value different, even if I don't agree. And somehow you need to figure out why that different is important under the kingdom of God. And this just roots me back to like my family. Like my sister grew up with some disabilities that physically she can't do a lot of things what other people can do, but I still believe Christ has put her on this earth to do something that she is called to do and that she will contribute to society for his word and his kingdom. And that's something that we have to look at. Every individual who may come from a different walk of life than us is that you have to seek what is their calling to the kingdom. And maybe they are living out their calling, but they're not doing it for the kingdom. And that is your job to bring them to it. And even if you can't, I think that's more of the perspective on how we need to approach people. I know we can never go back from with the Black Lives Matter or COVID-19. We can't go back to how things were, but we can work on stop destroying each other and as we repair the world. And because we're going to need all of us in order to make this better. And I think when I did a Facebook Live with my wife called "Let's Talk About It," and
it was so powerful.
Well, one of the biggest things that I try to explain to people is that you can't tell people how to think. You can't tell people what they think, because if you see it, touch it, did it yourself, this is what you believe. And unfortunately, some people think some things that may not be your reality. And it's unfortunate because they might have grew up in the same town or same city of you, but perspective is different depending on the skin you're in. Perspective is different depending on who raised you. Perspective is different depending on your experiences. So don't tell people how to think, don't tell people how to feel, but share your perspective and try to tell your truth. If your truth doesn't convince them of what is real and what is fake, then pray. So it's that but lean on your truth is the advice that I have on how we move forward.
I love that. And if we could all hear each other's perspective, Pastor Tony and I were talking on a call just yesterday about the importance of talking about not what's right or wrong, but what we each value. And that's how we learn and see. And that perspective piece, I think, is how we connect with each other and hear each other. I also love, there's one of my favorite poems. It's called "My Name Is Not Those People. My Name is Child of God." And I think that's what you hit at. We divide up in those people. That's when we have problems. But when we recognize each person by their first name and child of God and listen and hear, that's when we get somewhere.
Yeah. And I think it's always a reminder when I'm dealing with my son. Is like earlier he was going biggest outburst, and he's like, I'm going to yell as loud as I can because I know Daddy needs to be somewhere right now. I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna forgive you. I love you. I don't like what you're doing right now. And that's sometimes how we need to be with our neighbors. It's like,
absolutely.
I know I love you. I know God loves you. Don't like what you're doing right now. I don't like our current season, but at the end of the day, I'm still going to pray for you.
Absolutely. You are a good dad. He is lucky.
I wish. I have a very patient wife is what I have.
It takes a good team.
Yes.
So those of us listening, I know me, we're weary, we're tired of screens, tired of trying to work from home and parent from home. We're tired of hate, we're weary. What word of encouragement do you have for those who are listening who were just weary?
Yeah, I actually made a small post the other day. It's like, go into your happy place. Remind yourself what happened. Me and my son took a walk, and we just stood out by the lake, and I know everything I do, everything that I did to myself to overcome the barriers I overcame was for him, so I can be able to take care of my family. And that's my happy place. And cherish the moments that you have. I get to spend all day and all night with my wife and my son right now. And although I will complain sometimes about having to figure out who's doing the classroom time, how I'm going to teach him, how do I get quality time with the wife, where when you're spending all the time with the wife, how is that quality time? So there's a lot of different things going on right now, but go to your happy place and spend some time there. We all need to fight for social justice, but it doesn't need to be 24/7. You need to also fight for yourself sometime. You need to keep your peace of mind sometime. And remember, there is a balance between rest and work. And we have a lot of work to do, but don't forget to rest.
That's I like that. I like that. And as you say that, you bring to mind a couple of things. I have a question I always ask people, right? I always ask them, are you living life or is life living you, right? And understanding that it becomes what we make it, right? And so my question would be, given encouragement and things of that nature, what's giving Willie life these days? What perks your antennas? What's giving you breath?
I want to say being able to work in the nonprofit world and going out and meeting so many great people who wants the world to be a better place. It's giving me life. It's giving me hope. It's giving me the ability to keep going, because anyone that works in the nonprofit world can get beat up by situations to run into. I ran into a very tough situation today that all the resources that would be available to a person is being restricted because of COVID-19. You can tell that this person was desperate for support, and being a small nonprofit that's just starting out, I wasn't in a position to do anything for this person. You feel helpless, you feel hopeless during those times. But knowing that other people have been reaching out and having the group mentality of, I know I, as me, Willie Rankin, or my nonprofit can't do something immediately today, but as more people got involved, more people care, and more things are happening for some of these families. And when I took over the company, I changed our tagline to "Together We Rise," because it takes all of us. It takes all the people churches, different workers, different people. And we have a lot of diversity in West Fort Worth. And I think I embrace that by saying, let's bring it all on, because all of y'all do something different for the kingdom. And I think if we value all of it, we're going to get all the right pieces we need to turn around the world. If we keep isolating certain people or not asking them to participate in the changes we're trying to make, there's going to be a few mechanisms that won't work correctly. And it's because we left out the people who were called to do those certain aspects. We left them out of the work that needs to get done. So that's something that keeps me going, is that so many people do exist that want change, that want to make a difference, and they're willing to do the work to make it done. And that inspires me to keep going. So,
absolutely. Awesome. Thank you. And that's the end of our official questions, but I want everyone else who's here to get to ask questions of Willie. If you have questions about his nonprofit, LVTRise, about the stuff he shared about his work, if you're on Zoom, you can turn your camera and mic back on and ask those questions and join the conversation. And if you're on Facebook Live, feel free to type those questions in and we'll make sure they get to him. So feel free to turn your cameras back on, turn your mics back on, join in. While we're doing that, make sure you check out LVTRise, check out their website, go volunteer, figure out ways you can donate, get involved, whatever you can do. Willie and LVTRise are doing phenomenal work in our neighborhood and our community. And he's right, it only works if we do it together. That's the only way our communities get better. We're just joining in. If you have any questions, turn your camera on and let us know.
So I have one more question, really, while we're waiting for them to join in. And creating a nonprofit, and I get the sense of partnership is a big thing for your nonprofit and reaching out. And what's been the best avenue for you to reach those partners that you need to get in touch with?
Well, I use different mechanisms to get a hold of somebody, but a lot of times I pull on a string of someone I know, but it's physically asking for help. Like, hey, I got this going on. Do you know someone that helps? I can ask Allison, or I can ask someone else, and you'll be surprised of the network of people know when you just ask for help. It's like, hey, I'm trying to find somebody who understands food pantry. Like when COVID hit, our food pantry almost tripled within the next week, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh, I ran out of food, and I feel so bad because so many people need food. And then I talked to some of my other nonprofit partners, and they're like, we got to close our doors because all of our volunteers are seniors, and seniors don't feel comfortable serving the public right now during COVID-19. So I just said, like, hey, like, I put out a newsletter, and I asked some friends. I was like, can you ask your church to help us out? I don't have enough money for food, and I don't have enough volunteers to give out the food. And sure enough, the next week I got donations, and I got Tarrant Area Food Bank increasing our food. I got Community Food Bank. I had Councilman Byrd, and I had Councilman Gray reach out saying that we have connections that can get you food. Don't spend that money on food. Spend money on more resources to help you distribute the food.
Yeah.
So from that happened, we haven't had to turn anyone away for food since. So that's really, it comes down to everyone that's in your circle, ask for help, and ask them to ask their circle if they know anyone who can help. And just be very specific on what you're looking for. I use social media. You'll see me on Facebook or LinkedIn to do different things, but a lot of it came to do just physically asking people I know, can you help me with this? And I think God takes care of the rest. So that's how we've been able to make it this far.
Other questions for Willie?
Willie, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Dan Lamb, what is so far has been the greatest success of LVTRise, and what has been the goals that you're having the most trouble with at the present time?
LVTRise biggest accomplishment so far is we are finishing up phase 1 of our construction renovation. Hopefully by this August, we'll be able to open our doors to the public. We have 2 buildings. Our front building we dedicated to social services. Our back building we dedicated to after-school programming. And we were able to raise all the funds for our front building, and we were able to partner with certain social services to give people from the neighborhood access to social services without having to drive downtown or driving to East Fort Worth. So that has been a huge accomplishment. And come this August, I'll let y'all know, I'm not going to give the official date, but I'm planning on having a grand opening in August to kind of let people see how much we've accomplished so far from that. The next challenge is renovating our back building. And so as much work as it took to raise the funds and get the partners in place for us to open our front building for social services, we also know after school programming is just as important. And that will happen after we renovate the back building. A lot of people in the community can't wait for it to happen because after school programming is very scarce. We identified one big reason so many kids get in trouble or juveniles get in trouble in the neighborhood. It's because they didn't have anything to do. And that community center represents something to do in the neighborhood. So we've launched our capital campaign for our back building to raise enough funds to get that done. And I'm starting to ask the businesses if they have any sponsorship opportunities or support opportunities to fund that back building. We already know it's already going to be booked before we built it because so many community members are coming saying, how do I get my kids into this program? And we haven't even started enrolling yet. So, so that's the next big hurdle. And I think another temporary issue I face is I expect a child on August 2nd. I'm going to have my second kid. It's going to be a little girl. And I only have one other employee, so I'm worried about having enough support to run the front building with me being out. So I am arranging volunteer positions to kind of welcome people as they walk in or guide them to different resources that might be available and more of food pantry or receptionist type positions. I know we're still going to limit the amount of people who come in our building because of COVID-19, but that's going to be that's approaching pretty quickly. So that's also something I'm worried about spending the much needed time for my newborn, but also making sure that the center is taken care of when it comes to the work that they're trying to do.
Okay. We'll make sure churches won't we that we get him the volunteer so he can be with that new sweet baby girl.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Willie? Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, Willie. It was amazing, and the work you're doing is phenomenal. And thank you more than that for the work you're doing each and every day. And community and Ridglea folks who are listening, next week we will be back on Wednesday night for Bible study together at 7 o'clock here on Zoom. And then our next Faith in a World of Chaos will be next Thursday. We'll be interviewing Reverend Christy Dreschel, who is one of the regional ministers in our region as Disciples of Christ, who will talking more about what we're doing as a church. But thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And Willie, thank you.
Thank you,
so
Willie.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Willie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Willie.
Thank you for having me.
Y'all have a great night.